morning and welcome to the virtual Sunday service for the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Lake Norman. Our fellowship members follow different paths to find purpose and meaning, but we are united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all beings. We are a liberal and open faith community, and everyone is welcome regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender, economic status, or ability. We are united by our obligation to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Jim Price. I've been an active member of this congregation since 2019, and I've been a Unitarian since 2012. Our opening words today are from our fellow Unitarian, Marilyn Falkowski. We welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find answers to some of your bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. Our speaker today is the Reverend Justin Martin. Justin is an associate pastor at Caldwell Presbyterian Church downtown, but he is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister. The title of his presentation today is Called to the Hill. Justin says, these are very uncertain times, and it is hard to know where we go from here, but perhaps our values can lead the way. Please help me give a good welcome to our speaker today, the Reverend Justin Martin.
Good morning, everybody. It is so great to get to be with you all here today. I'm going to start out with a little reading. This is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 61, but I've adapted it a little bit. This same passage was used in the Gospel of Luke by Jesus to kind of be his mission statement upon who he was. So let's listen to that before we get started. It says, "The Spirit of God and all that is sacred is upon us, because we have been anointed by the Holy within. We have been sent to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners, to proclaim that this is the year of justice. This is the year of equality."
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while once we asked, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Well, I think it's probably worth acknowledging that what we just heard was certainly the most stirring words that any of us will hear today. In fact, you could see this as a slightly elongated response to her sermon, because we have truly heard the word proclaimed. I've known for a few months that I would be preaching this Sunday. And as we rode out those last few hard months, I could only think of one thing to talk about. The only thing that was on my mind, which was, where do we go from here? After the painful events of January 6th, I knew that I had no answer to that question yet, because I was suddenly not sure what the nation would even look like in the next few weeks, much less as we moved forward through the year. I had all this on my mind as I sat down with my family to watch the inauguration. President Biden gave a nice speech with lots of ideas about where we go from here, but it was not until Amanda Gorman began speaking that I felt that we might just get there. Poetry has a way of telling a deeper story than prose can, and I knew immediately that the story that she told about who we are and who we can be was what I needed to reflect on today. I will admit that I don't read much poetry. In fact, for most of my young life, I only read comic books. And comic books are what inspires one of the phrases I use most often with the youth in my church. Whenever one of our wonderful kids is up to something that I guess we'll charitably describe as ill-considered, I often say to them, "Are you using your powers for good?" And if it isn't the 15th time they heard it, they generally respond with something like, "Well, I don't have any powers." And I love this moment because it gives me a chance to shift their narrative about themselves or help them change the story about who they think they are. For most of us, being a person with power is not top of mind when we think about who we are. We define ourselves by what we do, what we've done, or what shortcomings we believe we have. And this is especially true for teenagers. In this moment, I get to tell them two very important truths. You are a person with power, fearfully and wonderfully made, and you get to choose how that power is used. The story that we tell ourselves about who we think we are and what we think we are capable of is one of the most powerful motivators in our life. It can inspire us to greatness, and it can torment us into hiding. Similarly, the story we tell about ourselves, we have a story that we tell about our community. The story that we tell about ourselves as a nation is what Amanda Gorman is rewriting in her poem with such surgical precision and theological depth. Over the last several years, we have seen many changes in the way the story of who we are as a nation is being told. And I experienced this in a pretty shocking way, as I was born at just the right moment to get what I call the whipsaw version of American history. When I was in high school in U.S. history class, I heard a story of this country's history that may be very familiar to what many of you heard in high school. This country was founded by basically saints who wrote a fantastic constitution full of compromises and checks and balances for the good of all people, and since then we have added amendments that have made it even better. Does that story sound familiar? That was what I heard in high school. But just a few years later, I took U.S. history again in college and heard a very different story. This country was founded by slaveholders for the expressed purpose of preserving white supremacy and protecting the entrenched power of wealthy white men. Does that story sound familiar? It was quite a shift to take in as a young man. And it's in this shifting sand of the American story that Gorman finds herself in when she states, "Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. For while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour. But within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves." She sees this shifting history and legacy of this nation that we share as not a weight that will hold us down, not a culture war to divide us, but instead as a profoundly biblical idea. This past we step into is a calling for us. We are called to be the ones to repair. We are called to be the ones to author a new chapter. We are the ones called to help ensure that this is the era of just redemption. Or if you wanted to put it another way, the Spirit of God and all that is sacred is upon us, because we have been anointed by the Holy within. We have been sent to bring good news to the oppressed, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and release to the prisoners, to proclaim that this is the year of justice. This is the year of equality. And as she says, this calling might be terrifying, and we might not feel prepared. But the biggest work we are called to do always seems terrifying at its outset. And none of us can truly think that we are prepared for what is to come. As Paul reminds us in his letter to the Corinthians, it's not having all the necessary knowledge that allows us to follow God's call. It's love that will build us up. There is no perfect person for the work that we are called to do. No perfect person to do the work of justice. And Gorman encapsulates this perfectly in words that can be equally read to speak to each of us and for our nation as a whole. She writes, "Yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose." I believe that each and every one of us is called to strive for justice. That each and every one of us is called to help bring about the beloved community, or as Gorman put it, called to raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. Now, as many of you know, even though I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, I currently work at a very liberal Presbyterian church in Charlotte called Caldwell Presbyterian. I've never been a Presbyterian at any point in my life, and so a lot of what they do is really surprising to me. One of the most interesting things that I've seen is that they do a ceremony to ordain the people on their board in the same way that we ordain ministers, complete with a blessing from the congregation and a laying on of hands. Like you, this is not what I was used to. But as I have come to know more about this practice, I've come to love it, and I'll tell you why. I was ordained as a minister 8 years ago. And at the time, everyone else that I knew who was ordained was called to do basically this same type of work. As my son said to me at the time, to stand in the front and talk in the microphone. But that is a tiny fraction of the work of a congregation. By recognizing the people leading our spiritual communities, we lift up not only them, but the importance and the diversity of the work they're doing. You might not at first see that making sure the finances are in order, or that you have a space to meet, is something that a person would be called to do, in the same way that a person would be called to be a minister. Through the process of ordination for board members, they take time to recognize that these people are following that call and do all sorts of work that our community could not live without. It tells a different story of who we are as a church, not one that lifts up one leader, but a community of people working together in faith. Because of the leaders who make the day-to-day work of your fellowship happen, the leaders who have come before, and the important work of many volunteers that don't get recognized in these grandiose sorts of ways, but I know for certain feel called to do the work they are doing in your community. Because of the calling of all these people, this fellowship can do the work that you need to do to strive for justice. The second Unitarian Universalist principle is to strive for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Each and every one of you is called to do this work. For some, that calling may come to work on your board. For some, that calling may come to teach your children, or empty the recycling, or make sure that the chairs are set out before the service. And for many, that calling begins when we leave this worship service and are sent out into the world, called forth into social action and service to the greater good. That calling may be to reach out to someone in need or to organize for all those in need. You may be called to walk door to door and check on your neighbors, or march together with them until all your neighbors are safe and free. However it may come to you, the call to build the beloved community is for all of us. No one is called to inaction. Gorman writes, if we are to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to the glade, the hill we climb, if only we dare. Today I ask you for only one thing. Dare. Use your powers for good. Climb your hill. So, where do we go from here? We must decide. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. Thanks, y'all.
Morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great break. This is called Don't Let a Good Thing Fall Behind. On this chosen path we pave, for every moment we can save, all the distance to the final line. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Little sister, don't you worry, your broken heart will surely mend. Little brother, don't you hurry, no, no, you'll see it all before the end. If the sky is dark around you, constellations will arise. Lift your head, feast your eyes. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Isn't life a giant wheel? Oh, the ride begins when you get on. Put the fire to your heel, boys, before your riding days are gone. Don't you let no cloud of thunder wash away that sunny day. Don't let your smile slip away. No, don't you let a good thing fall behind. On this chosen path we pave, for every moment we can save, all the wonders in this grand design. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Don't you let a good thing fall behind. Never let a good thing fall behind. No, don't you let a good thing fall behind. Take care.
Thank you so much for that, Justin. You're always inspiring and give us lots to think about. We look forward to the talkback session at 11, and we hope you're going to be able to join us there and chat with us. Again, we're always glad to have you with us, and we always enjoy what you have to say. There are a couple of announcements today. I encourage you to read our newsletter if you aren't getting the newsletter. On the site where you found us today, you can find an avenue to get on to the newsletter mail list. One of the things I'd like to mention is a new teen group that Autumn Weathers, our RE spiritual education leader or director, is putting together. I know that she had been working with the children now for just a while since we've had her, and she had been expressing for some time her hope and desire to spread the group out to include teens, and we do have a couple of teens in our group. So I encourage you to go out there and look at this opportunity, and there are ways that you might be able to get your friends and neighbors or any teens that you know hooked up with that. Also, the children's program continues. That is it's a support project for the animal ministry, and all you have to do is send a photo of your animal to Autumn, and one of the children will draw a picture of your animal and send it back to you. They don't ask anything for this. It would be nice if you'd make a donation to the Heart of the Carolinas UU Animal Ministry. That's what they encourage you to do. And it's a very, very worthwhile project. So we encourage that. Okay, moving along. If you're a visitor, welcome. We're so glad you joined us today. And if you like what you've heard today and you're wondering how you might stay connected or get involved with our congregation, please reach out to our membership chair, Linda Heidenberg. Her email address will be found at the bottom of the screen. We encourage members to keep reaching out to each other, to one another virtually whenever possible. It is important that we put in extra effort to sustain the deep bonds that our community has formed. And so now I extinguish the chalice, but not the flame that lives in our hearts. So go and have a good week. Go in peace. Namaste. Shalom. So mote it be.